my experience is right in the middle of that, the epicenter, if you will, of the heyday of high school swimming in Michigan. And so I have a unique perspective. I moved to Michigan in 1960, however, so I don't have a history of growing up as a child. My childhood, I grew up in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where my water background comes from. I learned to swim literally before I could walk, according to the parents. My father was a not a swim coach, but a multi-sports coach, and spent his life in search of the perfect football team, which he was good enough to take a couple of state championships in Florida and then in Michigan when he moved to Michigan as a football coach. They were smaller schools, but so he was an athlete growing up, multi sports. And he was the one that initially got me interested in swimming, showed me the rudiments. And when I was living in Florida, it was paramount to be a swimmer or know your way around the water. And so I spent a great deal of my youth in the ocean and had some of my most profound experiences as a child in Florida and in the ocean. Most notably in my personal history was encounters I had with wild dolphins off the coast of Fort Myers, Florida, when I was a knee-high, toe-headed, knock-kneed little kid who had a penchant for taking my toy snorkel, not even snorkel, they had snorkels back then, but toy mask and flippers out from the shallows into the deep water to be with this pod of bottlenose dolphins. I didn't know at the time, but of course it had a profound effect on me to the core of who I am. And to this day, it still unfolds and still is a wealth of wonder and joy and gratitude for life. So I would say that the dolphins, in a way, kind of provided a very deep, deep water liquid incentive in my life. So I was totally comfortable. If anything, I've said to people that I'm more comfortable in the water than I am on land. And that's always been the case. So that's where I came into the picture.
I love the background.
Sorry?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I thought you were finishing. I love the background, and I want to kind of fill in some of that. So you graduated high school, I think, in 66. Is that right?
Correct.
So in 60, you probably would have been about 11 or 12 when you moved to
I was 12 years old when we moved to Michigan.
And it was for dad's, essentially it would have been for dad's work. That's what brought you to Michigan?
Well, okay, yes and no. Two things. My parents were divorced when I was 9 years old. My mother and sister moved to Michigan because her family, she grew up in Ohio, and so her family was settled. Her sister and her larger family, and she was from a farm community in Ohio where she grew up. So she was looking for family. My father, on the other hand, was a Bostonian, and we moved up to where he grew up as a youngster, to Schenectady, Michigan. So that was a split that happened when I was 9 years old. I was affected deeply, much more deeply than I could even imagine as a 9-year-old by that trauma in my whole emotional body. Okay, I went deep down to try to contend with it, because as a 9-year-old, and then my life up to that point, I was an outgoing kid, did a lot of stuff, played Little League Baseball, won meets, medals at the city swimming meets where you'd swim against other kids of your age, so on and so forth. So I was a well-adjusted youngster, but then at 9, this whole thing went blank and threw my life into a different place. Let's say a non-ordinary reality, if you want to use Carlos Castaneda, one of my early inspirations for my own introspection. So obviously that had a big impact. I moved to Michigan. I moved to Schenectady, New York with my father. He tried, he taught high school there because he was qualified as a football coach, a basketball coach, a track coach. He could coach anything, and he taught biology. He was a double master degree in biology from Boston College. Anyway, so he was kind of like, in psychological terms, he was, my logical, rational self. My mother was the intuitive self. Okay, so if there's those splits, so that thing was left in the dust. My father recognized that I had proclivity for swimming, and he enlisted me in the YMCA in Schenectady, New York, and there was a swimming program there, and so I started doing swimming exercises, so to speak, at the age of 9.5 and 10. Meanwhile, I blossomed up. I got fat, and that was the emotional part, trying to bury it, not understanding, and I blew up into a little donut. And Butterball, I mean, people couldn't believe me when I would go to the swimming meets as a youngster, because I didn't lose my baby fat until I was like 14 or 15. That's so like going into high school. My freshman year in high school, I looked like, the fat boy, that would be left out of all the sporting events. But underneath all that fat was this deep, deep penetrating desire. And I didn't know what the desire was, didn't matter, but that was my motivation. I had this desire that I was going to win, no matter what. I was going to work hard. I could chase whoever it was I could chase down, and I could win. I could beat them at whatever. That was my thing, in a focal point. My father, being a coach, he nurtured my talent for the competitive spirit. Because that, in athletics, as you well know, you've got talented guys and they make it to a certain level, but they never go to the next level. What's the next level? Aside from being physically capable and working out to us, with everybody else, then the next layer is, no, I need to do more than that. I need to go to the next level. I need to focus higher. I need to go to the next level in the pyramid. And there's a couple of steps before you get to the pinnacle, if you will, the very top of that pyramid, which is championship level. Olympic champion, NC2A champion, national champion, AAU champion. Those are guys who sacrificed and had such an intense focus on what they were doing that they were able to get to that level. And that's true across the board, no matter what sport that you're doing. But in swimming, it's particularly about the individual. Because why? You're in a swimming pool. Your competition is the line on the bottom and some splashing over here or here, but basically it's all inside. You don't hear anything, you're all inside. It's all an internal machinery going on that focus your attention. And I didn't learn until years later, when I started to do yoga and meditation and some of these other practices, that what I was doing then was a very, very deep form of meditation, such as martial artists in the Asian traditions. You focus the mind. So I was focusing the mind on this line on the bottom, and that was my whole life, literally. Because I couldn't contend with the emotional imbalance. I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the wherewithal. My intellect was focused on one thing: swimming. I studied Swimming World magazine. I memorized all the times that everybody who did anything. I knew who was doing what. I followed Gary Hall, his career. Don Scholander. I mean, these are all the people that were my world. I was Swimming World. That was my whole reality. When I moved to Michigan in 1960, that was just putting my foot into the water of this great swimming pool. Where? Brennan Pools, Olympic trials, 1960. Just moved to Michigan. My dad made sure we had tickets in the bleachers to watch some of the finals and semifinals, and get a firsthand exposure of what that caliber of competition looked like. And that affected not only me, but everybody in Michigan, profoundly. And Michigan, my father, because he was a coach and he was smart, he knew his research, he knew that Michigan was a top school primarily because of Matt Mann. Matt Mann invented the whole program of swimmers. And I literally and figuratively, the programming of swimmers and swimmers' mentality and what it took to be able to be a competitive team member and yet a competitive individual within that team membership. I didn't know the man. I only saw the remnants, the ripples in the pool that he left from his magnificent. And he influenced all the swimmers naturally, but all the swimmers who became coaches, or all the coaches who had read about him or knew about him or knew people who knew him. And so people like Jim Councilman was only happened because Matt Mann. There could be no Jim Councilman without a Matt Mann. And I'm not saying Councilman ripped off Mann. He became the next extension of the Matt Mann phenomenon. Because here was a man, a coach, who understood the dynamics of what it took to make a champion and a championship team. He had like 12 NC2A titles or whatever it was to his, his teams. So he was a major, major influence. So by 1960, the epicenter of swimming in the US was Michigan. And other states were looking at it and saying, okay, well, how can we compete with the Michigan swimmers? Battle Creek, huge, huge swimming power. Grosse Pointe, huge swimming. We're talking about the 60s now. Birmingham Sea Olmsted, perennial state champion. You had a couple of schools, like East Lansing had a team. Ann Arbor would always put a team together because of U of M, right? So you had Lansing with Michigan State, and you had U of M, and the youngsters had a chance to train at a high level. Where I was recruited, not so much recruited, but my father looked around and he said, okay, where's the best place for a young, potentially talented boy to be influenced towards the highest level of swimming? Well, the first thing we did was go to the YMCA because that's what I've been doing in Michigan, so I'm familiar with that. I figured I could handle that emotionally. And I think he was well aware of the emotional impact that the whole breakup had, because we moved back to Michigan to be close to my mother and sister because I was not doing well in the 2 years that we had been parted. I turned into a little balloon. I was, becoming more and more introverted. I was getting into fights in the school. So I was not doing well. But I was starting to beat him in the swimming pool, which I really loved, and he was, he was not a swimmer, but, an athlete. And we would have competitions up and down. As a 10-year-old, I'm trying to race my father at the length of a 20-yard YMCA pool. All right, so we come to Michigan, join the YMCA team that has the best record for winning YMCA meets, which is, in Detroit. Now, the record was put together because they had a very good swimming coach by the name of Corey Van Fleet. And Corey had initiated a program there that had produced championship teams. Well, by the time we got there, Corey had already moved on to Birmingham Seaholm High School because he was good and they wanted the best and they could pay for it. And they gave him a nice job where he could be just a swimming coach in the wintertime and a country club coach in the summertime, and he could do whatever he wanted. And so that was the programs that initiated there. So I went to the YMCA swimming program. We still had the remnants of Corey's team, and we were good enough to go and win regional meets and championships and what have you. I was on a couple of winning relays. Well, that team, my father, because he was a coach, knew that team had kind of reached its pinnacle, and that because Corey wasn't there anymore, we couldn't go any higher. So the first thing he did was look, who's the next name that comes up on his radar? The name was Harry Hawk. So Harry Hawk had already established a program in the late 50s, early 60s with age group swimming, AAU swimming, hosted by the Detroit Parks and Recreation. Now, I'm probably telling you information you already researched and know about, but Harry was the epicenter of 60s swimming in high school competition of the 60s. Epicenter in the sense that he was the magnet for the talent. He had the psychology to turn out championship mentality and team unity. He incorporated the whole Matt Mann ethic, Jim Councilman ethic, the Harry Hawk method, all different, all dynamic, all requiring total commitment to the coach in order to get success. And he would recognize that, he would nurture that, and he had such power that he could literally give us an assignment. He would do these team relays, 50-50s, where you would do an exchange with one other swimmer, right? And so you'd swim as fast as you can. And then another one of his favorite ones was the 2-man relays, where it's a 25-yard pool. And he would match you up with somebody who was very close to you swimming wise, and or would push you actually. And he would always put me, I was a fat little butterball kid, and he would put me with this girl swimmer who was very good. And Lee, her name was Lee, and she would just love to see me, because you had to swim a length of the pool, touch, the swimmer would take off, you had to climb out of the water, run back to the other end of the pool before that swimmer got to the pool, got to your edge to take off. Or else they're waiting for you to come and you get your round, and then they would be able to be that far, much farther ahead of you. A competition like this was a 2-man relay that got everybody in incredible condition. Why? Well, Harry Hawk was a UDT man. So he would use these techniques that he learned from underwater demolition team workouts that would put his people into peak condition. Patent pool swimmers were in the best condition of any swimming AAU teams in the area.